uh, American Revolution yet. We're working there. We are currently um, a little bit before the American Revolution, as people from Europe started flooding into the North Americas, and bringing along with it their beliefs. You know, as I was thinking about the North Americans coming in and bringing their beliefs, how could they not bring their beliefs with them? They brought with them all their belief systems with them. Their religion, but also their system of governments, their gripes, their complaints, their baggage. How could they not bring that with them? Um, which I think is what people from other states are complaining about with Californians moving around. Um, how can you not bring it in? I joke, but it is something that we think about. It is something that we will see that as they come and as they come with power, they're going to overthrow the already established powers that are living here as they expand. Um, and you know, we like to think of you know the Native Americans or the First Nations people as, but they were powerful in their own rights. The Mayans before the colonists got there were doing brain surgeries, and we like to think that they were just, but they were a power in their own right, and as uh, European people moved in, they did so with new diseases and with threats of violence and with violence and new tactics, and it became a war, and then the Europeans won. Um, that's why I don't really feel bad for the Native Americans, because it was a war. I mean, I wasn't part of it. I grew up in the Native American territories, and I think one of the biggest thing we've done in mistake to dealing with them is giving them and giving them and giving them and giving them. And I see the same thing in out of California. They just give, and give, and then they created people that can't do anything on their own. When I was teaching in Gallup, a lot of my students, I'm teaching English, I'm teaching history, I'm teaching reading. Why do I need to know any of this? I'm just going to collect my check, and that'll be enough for me to survive. I'm going to collect my check. Without doing anything, I'm going to collect my check. And they didn't do, and so they didn't think they needed to do anything. And it has absolutely, the Navajo Nation at one point actually was almost completely sovereign. And by that I mean they had their own nation. Were almost economically independent of the United States. They were, and then corruption came in, and they started asking for handouts. And now, I don't know, biggest trade there is sex abuse. Um, it's alcoholism is rampant. Um, I think the biggest dissatisfaction we did is we just kept handing them stuff, and they said, "Well, you owe us. You know, we really need to stop this. If we want to give them anything, give them running water and say, hey, get a job." Because a lot of we here we neglect that there are places in the United States that don't have running water, sewage, and you know, you know roads, telephone, electricity. Uh, it was not long ago, 3 years ago, 4 years ago, we took the youth group to New Mexico on that mission trip. What an eye opener it was for many of them. Might have been 5 years ago. So, anyways, what an eye opener! They saw a place in the United States that didn't have running water and roads. That was yeah. Um, But that is one of the things that does happen and it is unfortunate the way it does play out. Um, as Europeans flood into the what will become the United States, the North American territories. It is unfortunate how that plays out, um, but it was religious as well as nationalism, and it was the way people thought it was happening in Europe. This kind of behavior had been happening for years. People conquering other people. We've just finished talking about European, the wars, all the wars in Europe that's already been happening. That was normal behavior. And so when they get here, it's normal behavior. And of course, the Native Americans were not free of that. They were at war with each other just as much as they were with the thing that really that separates it out is now for the first time there's in the United States what becomes a racial divide with the slave trade and with Native Americans. There's a clear um, they don't all look alike. If you're in Europe, everyone kind of looks alike, but you're killing everyone anyways. But everyone looks alike. So your divisions are different, but it does become racial or skin tone based, I guess, or culturally based. I'm not really crazy about the term race. That's neither here nor there. I guess I'll use it because it's what we have. But anyways, modern culture is coming in at this time period. Modern culture is coming in, and it's starting to separate from the control of the Christian world. Remember the English church, the German church, they were all under the Roman Catholic Church had come in, and the Protestantism came in, and then this idea that you don't have to have, that the state can be separate comes back in. It was how it was before, and then it comes back in. And so you start having this separation between church and state happening. And so we start seeing these tendencies arrive, and on top of that, people began what's been called the rationalism movement. Rationalism. We'll talk about some of those people as we get to them, but and which will give birth to liberalism in the church. No, liberalism of today is not the same thing as liberalism is. The words are the same, but it's not the same thing. It just means not. The word liberal means not orthodox. That's what it means. So it's not part of the orthodox pattern. So it's liberal. And liberalism then actually looks more like Republican of today than. These things. That's why I have trouble with like terms like left, right, liberal, because they're fluid. You read a history book and you say, "Well, he was a Democrat." Well, yeah, but that means something totally different than it does today. Those things are fluid because time changes and our ideas change and the way we address things change. Remember, when we look back in the past, we're dialoguing with it. We're not judging it. We're not putting ourselves on it. We're dialoguing with it, and we have to dialogue with the past for what it was. It is what it is, and they were what they were. And remember, most of them, we have to take them at their word. They thought they were right. We may say, "Well, you were wrong," but for them, it was what was right, and so we have to take them at their word that they thought they were doing even God's will. We might say that as they were misguided or whatever, but that's neither here nor there. We're dialoguing with the past, and we take them at their words and say, okay, this is what's happening. And so we're going to see things of the rise of denominations are growing out of this period. The rise of freedom of religion, which it's so funny. We talk about freedom of religion, but what the early founders only meant was freedom of Christianity. uh, of the Protestants. Free for me, not for you. That's what a lot of them really did mean. That's just, I guess that's the way we normally. That's not human nature, isn't it? Sometimes when we want something to be free, we mean free for me, um, but not for you. I mean, think about the whole call for for free healthcare. Let's talk for free healthcare. What we really mean is I don't want to pay, someone else is paying for it. Well, I'm not so crazy about that one. Uh, but free for me, anyways. Um, but so that's something that we're going to see in this time period as the modern period in the United States comes in. At the time period, it has to hit just right. People have been coming to the North America for actually quite some time. We know that Christopher Columbus was not the first person to discover it. I mean, there's lots of documented evidence that it wasn't. But what happens is Europe is at the prime part for this mercantile industry to take its nationalism, to take its way of doing business, and for nationalism and for religion. All hits just right that this happens. If it happens 100 years before, it doesn't happen. Actually, people were coming and it didn't happen. Who knows what happens if it would have happened 100 years later? It's just at that time. That's the way history works. Everything has to play out just the way it is. Otherwise, it wouldn't have happened that way. We think about like Jesus Christ in our Bibles. Jesus has to happen right when it does happen. Otherwise, it doesn't happen. The Roman society has to be just the way it is, with the Roman road, with the languages, with the people, the way they're thinking, the everything has to be just right. Otherwise, it doesn't happen. And so we can't say, well, so we can theorize what happened if the United States, if the North America had been discovered 100 years later. Well, then it would have played out very differently. Because in order for things to happen the way they did happen, everything has to happen just the way they did. If that makes sense. And so it's, and so, so yeah, so we dialogue with this, and um, anyways, there we go. I don't know if you can see that. You can see the 13 colonies. All right. Well, go to the notes on your phones. It's in there. I put it on there too. This is a map from the National Geographic. Actually, some of you might actually have the national. I know some of you who are National Geographic people. They used to have those maps in all the books, and some of you actually. First time I saw this one was in one of those. They had the maps they pulled out from the National Geographics and take it out and put it in your little holder. I still got some of them. I don't have this one anymore, but I looked at all those maps so much they tear up. But this one comes from National Geographic, and you can see it. Like I said, go to your notes. But it is a map of the 13 colonies, and for the most part, we're not going to talk about Roman Catholics. They are very popular under Roman Catholic, and the rest of the North America, Spain, Mexico, and all that coming up from Central America will all be Catholic. And early on, Roman Catholics had chartered companies to keep the colonies under the rule of the thumb, while Protestant rulers want free enterprise and mercantile industry and whatnot. So you're going to see a decline in the Roman Catholic presence, especially in the 13 colonies, because of the economic boom that went along with the people that were supporting the Protestants. Um, and so we're going to see a lot of, you know, a lot of the stock companies are going to be from Protestant regions, and they're going to be from the mother country and stuff like that. So we're going to see a lot more of the Protestant pop up in early 13 colony history. Now the Roman Catholics, um, they they're going to be in like Arizona, New Mexico, California. Um, and actually, one of the things that's important for the colonies in the United States is they will actually be offering protection. Because remember, Roman Catholics are a lot more militant than we at that time period than we think of. You know, we think of Roman Catholics now; they're not military at all. But at that time period, remember they had a lot more military arm, and so they were actually protecting settlers as they moved around from the Native Americans, from the First Nations. Um, and so Spanish were exploiting the natives for gold and silver, and French were in uh, Quebec were going for the furs and um, oh man, I should have brought that book. There's a wonderful book, and I forget what it is. The title of it right now. It's the fur trade and oh, anyways, maybe I'll remember it next week. Anyways, great book. I just finished reading about a month or two ago about the fur trade in Quebec and the French fur trade. It was wonderful. Guess I could look it up, but not right now. Um, so we're going to see that, and so the Roman Catholics are going to kind of play out of our minds right now. And we're going to see a lot more of the denominationalism of the Protestants coming to, because it's as they travel from um, across the seas, bringing with them all their desires and hopes, and because remember, a lot of them are actually, well, let me rephrase this. Whenever a people group move, or a bunch of people, or even you individually move, or have a life changing event, there has to be what's called a push and a pull, right? You have to have something pulling you, the new land being there. There's offer of money. There's offer of freedom. There's offer of a chance to get you established. But there also has to be a push. In these lands, a lot of these Protestants were undervalued. They weren't. They were the poor. They were the ones who weren't getting their fair shot. They would. They felt like they were, out of control, and they were. So there has to be, in some cases persecuted. We talked about that last week, about the persecution happening from Christian to Christian. And so you have this desire. So it has to be push and a pull. And anytime you make a life-changing event in your life, I mean, think about when you moved here to Laughlin. Some of you, it was pretty recently. Some of you not so recently. You make that life-changing event. There was a desire, I don't know, maybe to go somewhere different. For some of you, out of California. Some of it was, some of you it was because of you couldn't afford California anymore. So maybe it was because of that neighbor who came in. Whatever reason, there was that push. The cold weather. I know that. She was from Wyoming. That cold weather. That was definitely a push. Something that was. You were unhappy, and then your pull is the recipient of that. There's a fix to it somewhere else. There's warm weather here. It's cheaper to live here. There's not as much crime here. There's very little taxes. No traffic. You have to, you have to go to Bullhead for everything. That's a slight downside. But for many of you who were living in, say, L.A., driving 30 minutes is no big deal anyways. I visited L.A. once, and I swore I'd never go back. Blah. I hated sitting in traffic. We sat. I remember. I don't know where we were going, but I remember sitting in traffic for 2 hours, and we went like across the street. I mean, it felt like it was. I mean, it was. Uh, yeah. um, but anyways, so as things happen, I am not going to go into all of American history with you. I'm going to focus on the church, okay? So if you don't remember your American history, there are parts where you might feel a little lost. Go read a book, watch a YouTube video, um, because I'm going to be, but I remember, so because there are a lot of things that I'm just not going to be able to go into. I could go an entire class on just the settling of the United States and the 13 colonies. So we're not going to do that. Um, so the Virginia contract, the Virginia Company, was given its charter in 1606 to settle and exploit the land in the Americas. They sent out settlers to the place. What is the Virginia Company? What's their big one? Most well known colony? No, Jamestown. The town of Jamestown, 1607. Yeah, Jamestown. They were settled, and with the Virginia Company in Jamestown, their primary they will be establishing mostly among the Anglican Church, that Church of England, and so they're going to be the Anglican Church, and they're going to be settlers. Robert Hunt, chaplain, was actually the first to give Lord's Supper to colonists under the protection of an old cell while worshippers sat on logs. But he was the first to give Lord's Supper, or were first recorded, anyways, I should say, to give Lord's Supper here in the United States. So that's kind of a cool thing that he's got going for him. John Rolfe. How many of you guys know John Rolfe? You guys heard of him? Yeah, guy who marries Pocahontas. Yeah, John Rolfe, not the one Mel Gibson played in the cartoon. That was something else. Um, John Rolfe. I guess I've told John Rolfe's in the second movie, but I've never seen that one. So apparently Disney did a second Pocahontas. Um, that's what my daughters tell me. um, but he lays the foundation for the early wealth of the colony by successfully growing tobacco in 1612. That became the cash crop of the South, and it's actually going to continue to be one of the main ports. Even today, growing tobacco is a big industry out that way. Back-breaking work. Most people can. They make these machines that will pull it up and then hang it for you, but only the largest corporations can afford that. Most of it's done. You go in there and you grab it and you pull it and you hang it up and you hang it up, and it's a lot because you have to hang it to dry, and it's a hard back-breaking work. We saw a lot of that in Kentucky. I did a little bit of it, but I'm allergic to tobacco, so I couldn't do too much of it. I found that out the first year I was there. I was trying to make a little extra money. Went to the tobacco. They said, I could use some work. I said, well, I can do some work. I was strong, 19. I could do some work. And I found out very quickly that I'm allergic to tobacco. I had to wear gloves to finish my job. Yeah. That was something I did that only once. Yeah. Anyways, the colony grew tobacco, which is great, and it laid that groundwork, but it doesn't prosper economically until the kind of when it first started, it was a very communal pace, but they in 1619 they ended that, and it became a colonist for the company. And anyways, established slavery. It was one of the first places to establish slavery in the 13 colonies for the to work on tobacco plantations. Like I said, it's hard breaking work. Why do it when you can make someone else do it? Slavery, such a horrible thing. It's been going around since time immemorial. Once one person could conquer someone else, they had slaves. Um, but I really believe that the one of the biggest holdbacks to technological innovation is slavery. Why should I make it easier for myself to do something such as computers or the weave, the cotton gin, or anything like that? Why should I find a way to do it easier if I could just make someone else do it for me? Um, and who cares how hard it is for them? They're slaves. And so I really think that's one of the biggest holdbacks in innovation. Um, I read an interesting book, short story, I guess it was, years and years ago. I don't remember the title of it, but they made a postulation. What if slavery had never existed? And they talked about all the innovations that could have come out of because people don't like to work hard. And it was an interesting thought study, I guess we could call it. But anyways, uh, the Anglican Church became established um, in Virginia, and of course Puritans were also coming into Virginia as well. Anglican Church was established in Maryland in 1702, despite quite a bit of opposition by the Roman Catholics, who had been permanently settled there by Lord Baltimore. Baltimore that's where the city Baltimore gets its name, because there was a man named Lord Baltimore. He was a lord. That was his last name. Um, but it was interesting because he actually uh, permitted quite a bit of religious toleration at first, but he ended it as soon as Roman Catholics started becoming in decline. Like I said, I just mean for me, not for you. And that's and we see that, I was just now popped in my head. We see that with a lot of Christians say, I just mean for me. I don't mean for you. Like I don't want Islam being part of. I want prayer in my school, but not Islam prayer. I want we have to think about these things. Um, we what freedoms we have in religion for us, we have to allow for other people as well. I just don't want to go too far the other way where Christians don't have any, which is what we're seeing. I could tell you some stories about that on the reservation, but that would get us off topic. But yeah, the Act of 1715 made the Anglican Church the established church in North Carolina. Georgia accepted the Anglican establishment in 1758. Um, so, so the Church of England slowly takes over a lot of the colonies. Actually, doesn't really change until the American Revolution. Do a lot of because remember, the Anglican Church is the Church of England. Well, the American Revolution happens, and who are they kicking out? England. Well, if England's got to go, so does the Church of England. And we don't think about that often. We don't think about that aspect of the Revolution as well. But the Church of England is controlled by. Remember, we talked about how the king or queen of England was the head of the Church of England, of the Anglican Church. And so, with them saying bye bye, you got a lot of that church will go away. There is still a strong Anglican present here in the United States. It never fully gets like wiped out or anything like that, but they do have to take a different tax, and they will not be the established religion in those territories after the revolution. So, um, but there will be people that hold out to the teachings of the Anglican Church, and it will remain. Um, um, in New England, congregationalism becomes the established church. Um, Early in the 17th century, the Scrooby congregation, not Scoobies, Scroobies, um, had migrated from Holland to Holland, and then to escape persecution because of their congregational ideas, they actually eventually migrate over to the Americas, um, because they don't want. And we talk about racism. uh, they're from England. They go to Holland and they say we don't want our youth being integrated into Dutch society, so we're going to leave there and go to the Americas. We don't think about these kind of things, when we think about racism. We often just we see everything through the lens of like the transatlantic slave trade. But racism is more than just that. There's all kind of they didn't want them to be Dutch. So they said let's leave, and so they sent them. They left to the Americas. A London company of merchanters, the adventurers, led them lent them £7,000 to finance their voyage, um, and in August over 1620. Over 100 colonists, known as what we know as the Pilgrims, set sail from England in the Mayflower, and for some reason they land at Plymouth. Now, most historians I've read says it has to do something with when the beer ran out. Um, but for some reason, they set up at Plymouth in New England, rather than in northern Virginia. So they get a new charter from the company in the territories they were living in, and so they draw up the Mayflower Compact, which if you've like I said, I'm skipping a whole bunch here because you should know your American history. The Mayflower Contract's instrumental to government. It's important for what will become the Constitution of the United States. It's just one of those things that, anyway. But it will. They drop the Mayflower Compact to prevent unruly disruption in the colonies and in the surrounding colonies. Um, it was an extension of the covenant ideas of the separatists of civil government that the compact remained their constitution until Plymouth was incorporated with Salem settlement in Massachusetts in 1691. So it lasts quite a while. But as they land in New England, what will become New England, the elder of the religious leader, William Bradford, became the first governor. Um, and and his history of Plymouth Plantation, he wrote the history of Plymouth Plantation is the primary source, which you can still read about their hardships. At least 50 of the colonists died during the first hard winter. But from the next spring on, the colonists flourished, and they were soon off to pay off their debts, and Their spiritual and social lives were thriving. Um, then so they will actually eventually join up with the non-separatist Puritans who will settle in Salem and Boston. So um, the as you read about the Puritans start coming in, the Puritans settle in Salem, which is not far away from Plymouth. Um, the uh, the the uh, the Congregationalists are not really tolerant of other denominations, and so they term it the swarming of the Puritans, and they petition for rights to either kick them out or for themselves to migrate to the Connecticut River Valley, um, which they do. They actually permitted to leave. By 1633, towns were founded in what will become Connecticut, um, and the fundamental orders of Connecticut were drawn up as the constitution for the new colonies, and they were more liberal than the other colony, but it does allow for the Congregationalists to survive. The um, Puritans, and along with the Congregationalists, one of the most important thing that we remember in history that come out of the church in that period is the Salem witch trials. Um, we like the witches. Um, uh, in 1692. Now, a lot of people think, how many people died in the Salem witch trials? What do you think? Really, there's 14 men and 6 women. Um, I mean, when you read a lot of the history, like the early history, like people play it off as the Salem witch trials were really horrible, lots of people dying. It was 14 men and 6 women, which I know is too much for the practice of witchcraft. But it really just kind of shows how intolerant they were to other people, and but the idea of witches was something they carried on with them from England. The idea of witch trials and stuff like that is an interesting study that not really part of church history, but you can, well, I guess it kind of ties in, but because the church often does a lot of the persecuting. But but not the direction we're heading. But it goes back a long ways, and we talked about a little bit about it already. With like the false confessions that you would confess after torture and stuff like that. And so they brought some of that with them, and the idea of witches is something that I don't know, still very fascinating. When I said witch trials, many of you popped up. You're like, witches. I know this. Uh, we think about witches. It's something that tantalizes the mind, and that's that idea, and uh, and so it's something that we have to take in consideration as that it still plays in our thoughts and our mind. And they were intolerant of these ideas, anything that was seen from the devil. So what's their first response? They're going to kill it. And so they're going to have these witch trials, um, but like I said, it wasn't the huge massacre that some of the movies play it off to be. It was a relatively small thing. I know too much, um, but anyways, but one of the things that the Puritans do in Connecticut and in Salem and whatnot, um, as they're in that area, is they will not ignore the what they call pagan neighbors, the Native Americans. They will actually work among the natives uh, to there's actually John Elliott, a pastor of Roxbury Church, begins working to integrate the Native Americans into their town. So they're not like just killing them off or saying and just sending them off. They're actually trying to integrate them into the 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 town. By 1674, 14 villages with nearly 3,600 Christian Indians in it. Absolutely. Yeah, the very when we think about the Native Americans, when some people show up, the first thing they do is they want to kill them off. But some people show up and they want to learn from them and incorporate them, and they have this desire to say, well, if hell is real, if we believe in God, we believe that then our desire is to actually see you become Christian and become successful part of our community and become and integrate. We learn from you. We can work together and we can do things. And so, like, there's this so you see both sides in the founding of the United States and the North America as they they come now. Eventually, the Native Americans will begin to push back against the what they saw as a false religion into their own right and the taking of their people, and a war will actually strike out between the settlers as the settlers move onto their territory and start taking their lands, and the war breaks out as you can expect would happen, um those the the natives destroyed his villages, the ones that were cooperating with the villages. Um, and so, but he did, John Eliot, publish Old and New Testaments in the native tongue in 1660s. Yeah, 1663 and 1661. He did so early as 1600s. They were because remember they were coming from a place where they were beginning to how important it is that we have it in our own tongues, and so they said, well, we're coming here. Well, we want to tell the natives about Jesus, how great Jesus is. They need it in their own tongue. Why shouldn't we do it in theirs? So he will learn their language, create a writing system for it, and which is still something that is a lot of people are doing today. For example, the Gideons or the Wycliffes. Thank you. Um, they go into places that don't necessarily have writing systems, so you have to create a writing system first. And they live in the villages and they speak to the people. They learn the language and then they learn the culture and they learn what all the words mean. And they create a writing system and then they translate the scriptures into it. And then they can spread it. So it takes years and multiple people working on this project for years to develop the idea. I had the privilege of meeting some Wycliffe people that was what they were doing when they were stateside at the time when I met them. But they were living in Africa, learning languages that didn't have, and they were writing, and that's what they were doing. And it's something like for people that have a heart for it, they didn't want to. A lot of people say that Christianity wants to take away the culture, and that's not true. They just want to take Jesus to it. These people yes, there are Christians that do just my way or the highway, and they use Christianity as a tool of my way of power. That's true. That does happen. But majority of Christians just want to see people come to Christ, and so we see a lot of that as well. And anyways, ooh. The Baptist Church. The Baptist Church started in America was also associated with the swarming Puritans. Roger Williams, Actually, real quick, here's a picture of one of the first alphabets they were teaching people how to read with. Education is very popular in in the northern areas, and so they were teaching people to read. And if you read it here, like A is for Adam, Adam's fall. B is for uh, the Bible. Uh, I can't read some of this from back here, but anyways, so but each one of them is a something from the Bible. As they read, the A is for and then and B and C as from something from the Bible. It's kind of fun. Um, uh, this is Roger Williams, who was probably the first Baptist in North America, Providence, Rhode Island. He was educated actually as an Anglican minister and has adopted the separatist views, and that's where the Baptists come from. Um, he he actually was the Church of Salem called him as pastor in 1635, and um, but he got in trouble because he upheld that Indian had the right to own land, and it wasn't just the settlers. And he did things like oppose the state church, which Anglicans obviously are against, and many Congregationalists are against, um, and he said insists that magistrates have no power over man's religion. So, anyways, it said that he left his wife and children in and plunged into the forest, into the depths of winter, and wandered until friendly Indians gave him aid. And he purchased some land from the Indians and founded what will become Providence, Rhode Island. And that's where the first Baptist church was established in in what will become the United States. Um, Roger Williams. Um, that was established in 1639. Um, all of the members were rebaptized. Remember we talked about rebaptism because they were Baptist, like, but they were born into like the Anglican Church and the Catholic churches, both of which believed in infant baptism. And so the Baptist Church began teaching the idea that you believers baptism, so they were rebaptizers. I think we talked about that already in one point. And so they were all rebaptized, and so it was probably the first Baptist church in the Americas. Uh, Now, the one place that on the eastern side that Roman Catholic hangs on to is in Maryland. Maryland will be a holdout for the Roman Catholic Church, um, in in the 13 colonies, which is what I'm focusing on. Obviously, they're up north in Quebec and Louisiana, and but Maryland will be the holdout. Most of the Irish and the Germans who live in the area are Roman Catholic, and so that'll be the last holdout. Pennsylvania. I'm trying to get through these real quick. Pennsylvania will be known for their Quakers. Um, they appear in Boston in 1650, but they find they're not welcome in New England, and so they end up going to what will become Pennsylvania. They purchase land. William Penn purchases land, and you can read about the history of that on your own. But Presbyterianism will be brought in by Scottish Presbyterianism, um, and they will migrate to New Jersey and New York area, and so American, and they'll kind of integrate. Uh, Interesting enough, Presbyterianism doesn't really have like a dominant like New England or it kind of integrates into all the different places. They kind of anywhere that will take them. They kind of have a place that will take them, and so they kind of work their way through um, the places. Um, and so does Methodist. The Methodist um, was introduced into the 13 colonies by Robert Strawbridge in Maryland and by Philip Embury and Captain Webb in New York. Um, John Wesley sent Boardman and Joseph Fillmore as official missionaries into the area and into the colonies, and so it'll be one of those things. And the Methodists and the Baptists have something that really kind of stand out in American history because the Baptists have farmer preachers, which they're farmers. They work, they establish, but they're also preachers. They're not like the Anglicans that was their job. They were bivocational. They were farmers, and so it really. But they went to different farmers and they were preachers. But the Methodists have something that's kind of cool. The circuit riders, and they will travel by horse to different churches, and so they will make a circuit. And so this week they're at this church, and this week they're at this church, and this week they're at this church, and this week and so they'll make this circuit, and so the circuit rider will allow them to be at more places than other groups that are just in one town. They're all over the place, and we still see evidence of circuit riders even today. I knew I was in Kentucky, and one of the churches that was in the area, they were Methodist one week and Baptist the next week because the pastors rotated to different churches, so they would preach at multiple churches. So and some of the people went to all the services. They didn't care if they're Methodist, Baptist, but some were very much on Methodist, and some were Baptist, and they would rotate, and they would be at different churches at different times, so they would have different congregations at different areas of Kentucky. It was, and so we still see elements of the circuit rider mentality, even in smaller places, even today, where one pastor would be the head of multiple churches as they made their way around the area. So it's so something that's really kind of founding of a great idea in the colonies. All right, well, we are out of time. I wanted to get through this as well. We'll pick up with the Great Awakening next week and the 7 Years' War. And then we will start deism. I'd like to get through deism next week. Something to think about before we close out. Before we close out in prayer, though, is July 4th is a Tuesday. It's not next Tuesday. It's the Tuesday after that. So don't flip out. But we will be taking a vote next week whether we want to meet on the 4th or not. So I want you to give it some thought. And we'll just let majority win on this one, and we'll practice our independence and our congregationalism and we'll have a democratic vote in honor of our nation's history, and we'll let the majority win about who whether we meet or not on the 4th of July. I know some of you. I've already had people ask me. I don't want to be here on 4th of July. I want to be here, and so we'll just have a vote next week. I want you guys to think about it, pray about it, and we'll let the majority win. Because I know some of you plan to be here, and if we're not, if the majority of us don't want to miss stuff, we'll let you guys decide. There are benefits to meeting, there are benefits to not meeting. But we'll vote next week. So think about that, pray about that. Okay? Yep. Yep. Now, if they agree 2, then I will be here. And we'll cover whatever I figure out where I don't know where we're going to leave off. We didn't get as far as I wanted to this week, so and I was booking for time, so we'll see where we leave off and whatnot. So, but yeah, so all right, let's go ahead and close in prayer. Father God, we praise you today, Lord. We thank you for the wonderful blessing of Christianity coming to the United States, Lord. I'm thankful for your missionaries, Lord. I pray that you help us not to take on negative aspects of those who are coming in here and forcing for force and by creed other people away, Lord. But we pray that we spread your love and your grace and your sovereignty as we think of you as and we know you are Lord, and we're thankful for you being in the United States, Lord. We pray you protect us and continue to bless us as